What is going on, y'all? Elliot here with MovieFiles in the parking lot of an Alamo Draft House, about to go check out at 2:30 in the afternoon the last quotations marks of the Conjuring movies, at least the last of the Ed and Lorraine stories, The Conjuring, The Last Rites. I'm a fan of this franchise. I love the first Conjuring. I think it's one of the best horror films of all time. Second one's a really good follow-up. I wasn't a fan of the third one. And the universe as a whole, like Llorona, the nuns, Annabelle, there's some high highs, but there's some low lows in this franchise. But as far as The Conjuring goes, I'm a little bit excited, but also nervous. This is the end of an era, apparently. We'll see how much the box office dictates that. But as far as my nervousness, Michael Chaves, who is a decent director, but honestly, he did La Llorona, he did The Last Conjuring, and he did The Nun 2, I believe, which I think out of all his films, that's his best movie. So I'm hoping that he picks up the momentum and takes some of the tools, the best things of those films I just mentioned, and implements it in this last chapter with Ed and Lorraine. The trailer looked pretty solid. I'm looking for some good thrills, some good scares, but more importantly, I'm looking for a good story, and I want to care. Besides Ed and Lorraine, I love them. Patrick and Vera are great, but I want to care for the family that they're going to be protecting or trying to get an entity away from them. So we'll see what I think. Is this film worth checking out in theaters? I'm going to let y'all know on the other side. Wish me luck, and I'll see you soon. All right, let's jump right into it. Just got done seeing The Conjuring, The Last Rites, and I will say we'll jump to the positives and negatives and if it's worth seeing as we go along here. It's better than The Devil Made Me Do It, but unfortunately it comes nowhere close to the original Conjuring and the second Conjuring. And then if you include some of the spin-offs, the Annabelles of the world, the nuns, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Let's talk about the positives. I think one of the biggest things that I took away from this, and the thing that I knew I was going to probably like the most, and that is following Ed and Lorraine. We have Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson have been playing these characters for over a decade now. These are lived-in characters. These are recognizable characters. These are performances. You feel like you've been on the journey, right? Even they were in one of the Annabelle, I think they were in Annabelle 3, and they popped up in some of the post-credit scenes in the Nun films. And you just feel the weight and the trauma and the wins and the losses throughout their time. And I think Ed and Lorraine, regardless of how you feel about them, if you really do the research, there's obviously a certain portion of their legacy that a lot of people do not like about them in regards to taking advantage of people and exploiting people and families, what have you. But focusing on what the film has to offer, these are just performances from Vera and Patrick. And it just, there's a love that I love about the characters in regards to their love story and how that continues to be one of the focuses here. And they're just great, man. It's like when you just want to see them, conquer whatever entity, save the family they have to save, and save their own lives for Jesus Christ. Ed's getting up there. We've seen him deal with his health issues, which is a focus in this film. And Lorraine is just trying to be a good person, a good wife, and a good mother. So I just think that they are just, regardless of how I feel about the overall film and this franchise at this point, they have been the through line. They have been the positive point for me, and it stands true in this one. And even the emotional beats as we kind of go along into the third act and how we wrap up the story and how this case really kind of put it into their ghost hunting, paranormal hunting situation. So as a fan of Ed and Lorraine, I was satisfied with their conclusion. Now, this film focused a lot on, obviously we have their family with Judy and soon-to-be husband, played by Ben Hardy. We have the other family. Now, focusing on the Ed and Lorraine for a little bit, the Warren family, I really enjoyed the Judy story. I was surprised by that because this is if you follow along the franchise, this character has been recasted in every single movie the character's been in. So it was you always have to kind of refigurate yourself as let me get used to this actor portraying a character who we've seen from the beginning, but played by different actors throughout I think the only time they kept the same actor was in the first Conjuring, the second one. I think they kept that girl, but I think McKenna Grace was one of the Judys at one point in the Annabelle Come Home. But nonetheless, I believe the actress name is Mia Tomlinson. Really well cast. She reminded me of a young Zooey Deschanel, but she was really good. She has a lot of things that she's dealing with in this film. Again, knowing who her parents are and kind of the special abilities, if you want to call it that her mother has, and she seems to inherit that. I really liked her journey, and I like the idea of like trying to push past the narrative of where she comes from and this kind of burden she has to carry and pushing through that, but also trying to find love. You know, I mentioned Ben Hardy. He was good too. I like Ben Hardy as an actor. I liked, again, Warren stuff, Ed and Lorraine, Judy, and the boyfriend. Those moments, those beats really worked for me in this film. And I will say, as far as the scares go, at this point, it's very formulaic. You know, there is a playbook, it seems to be, in this franchise where it's like very telegraphed jump scares, very telegraphed when it comes to how certain entities and demons, and I'm so upset that James Wan didn't continue. I would have loved if James Wan would have directed this, if this is to be the last one from the Warrens family. But there are, you know, some decent scares. Not the best in the franchise, certainly not the worst, but I will say as far as the scares go, it takes a while getting to the negatives in a bit, but it takes a while to really get going in that department. But I feel like when the third act, which has its highs and lows, but at its best, there are some really effective use of cinematography, really good productional elements that really make you kind of get tensed up. So I will say, while I didn't find this as scary as the first or the second one, definitely probably scarier than third. The scares, like I said, overall were okay. All right, sorry about that. Had to switch the angle of the camera and had to turn my car around because the sunlight that was coming in was horrible. We'll have to fix that in post. Anyway, back to the positives. I will say, depending on how you feel about this word, you know, it could be a positive or a negative, but for me, it worked. And I'm referring to the fan service. Now, this film is not littered with fan service, but there are Easter eggs. There's nods to previous films. There's characters from previous films that make their way into this movie. And for some movies and franchises, it can be distracting. It could seem a little lazy, but here it worked. In particularly the characters that we see make a return at a particular scene. It worked for me because, again, if you follow the Conjuring universe and you've been following these films, it's just, it works. It works for me, how they use particular characters that we haven't seen. And also a particular behind-the-scenes character, or person, I should say, that makes an appearance that I quite enjoyed. But recapping my positives. The Warren family, Judy, Ben Hardy, the performances. There are some occasional scares, particularly in the third act, that I thought were effective. And, again, the use of callbacks and fan service. Getting into the mixed bag that I had, as well as my negatives. Now, I kind of alluded to it earlier when I said that it took a while for the scares to really kind of engage with me and my sensibilities in this franchise and just horror movies in general. But the same could be said with the story. This movie, more so than any of the other films, I can say, it's a drama. It is a heavy drama at points, which you can understand. Again, the movie is based on the Kroll, I think is how you pronounce it, Kroll or Kroll family, which is based on true events where this family, I believe it's Pennsylvania, it's like 14 years this family was dealing with this demonic situation, and it was heavily televised. It made it on the news, and, you know, some people didn't believe the family. Of course, the Warrens got roped into the mix, and it was the stuff I know about it, because they've made like TV movies and there's books about it. They focused on some of the activities that went on in this house, but there's a lot of other stuff that was alleged, that like sexual assault and other things that went down that this film didn't really focus on. But either way, the family that we focus on here, it didn't really, like, I think about the family in the first two Conjurings, especially the first one with the mom, the dad, the little girls, and the little boy, and that family, to me, it made me care. Like, it really made me feel bad for the family. I was rooting for the family. You felt the disturbance of what was going on from this entity, and the same thing with the second one. But the family here, is not that I didn't care for them. I just don't feel like the film put enough, like, the first half is really focused on them, but the way that the film uses their experiences just felt a bit generic to me. And I said how this film has a playbook. Michael Chaves, who directed this, and again, he did La Llorona, he did The Devil Made Me Do It, which was the last Conjuring film, which I did not like, and he also did The Nun 2, which I had moments that I enjoyed that. But there's something about Michael's direction to me that just feels so, he misses a beat. There's things that he misses, like, again, the emotional connection outside of the Warrens, but I think my emotional connection to the Warrens is based on previous films and just loving these characters more so than what he's doing with the movie, if you got to know what I'm saying. But I don't know. I didn't really buy into the family element. And there's a moment in the film where, they kind of realize, oh, there's something bad in this house. It felt rushed. Like, we see one scene. Was it two scenes? Yeah, there's one particular scene where a girl's vomiting blood. And then we focus on the Warren. It's like we cut back and forth in this movie, which, again, I was more focused on the Warren. But we have that moment. And the next time we see the family, it's just like we miss like 5 or 6 different things. Like I mentioned, there are, based on the actual true events, there's a lot of the story that they did not include in this film, which I think if they would have included that, it would have made me feel more inviting to their narrative. So I wasn't the biggest fan of the family because, again, it wasn't that I didn't care about them. I just didn't like the way that the film used them. The pacing to me felt very, very slow. That's a very generic word to use, but that's the only word that comes to mind when describing the pacing and how the film slowly crawls to certain reveals and moments. Like the actual case of the Warrens getting involved doesn't happen to about an hour and 15 to the film. Again, the first half is like, all right, we're focusing on the haunted family and going back to the Warren family and back and forth. And, oh, she's getting married. Oh, it was a really uneven first act. And that pacing was just so very uninteresting. Most of this film, especially the first act, is very paint by numbers. And the way, again, Michael Chaves, the way he builds suspense when he's scared, especially in the first act, it's so telegraphed. Like the music cuts out. There's little to no noise besides the one particular person in that scene. It's just like, okay, here we go. And there are some really bad, stick out like a sore thumb use of CGI in this film. And this was a topic of discussion a couple weeks ago with one of the trailers where they show like this old woman. That was fixed up in post by the time it got to the movie. It looked a little bit better, but not great. Which, speaking of not great, I don't want to spoil this, but think of The Conjuring 2 with the Crooked Man and how, like, I thought that was effective. And it was supposed to be a Crooked Man movie, but that never came to be. But think of how, like, that was so kind of, I don't want to say outlandish is the word, but it wasn't as grounded as the other scares in the film, but it was effective. This movie has a similar situation with a very familiar entity that we've seen in previous films where they make something small very large, and it looked terrible. And it really took me out. I laughed. I genuinely laughed at the scene because it was that bad. When you see the film, if you decide to see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Yeah, man, again, the pacing was off. The first act was pretty mixed for me. Like, again, the performances from the Warrens were carrying me and keeping me engaged. But everything else from the family element, the build-up, the lack of tension, really was weighing on me in that first act. And again, I just felt like Michael Chaves just doesn't, to me, he's so inconsistent with what he wants to focus on and how I don't think he has the right tools in his toolbox to really flesh certain things out, bad visual effects, in certain moments where I just laughed. Like I mentioned, the big, small thing made a big thing just was not that effective. So what do you think, Elliot? Would you recommend this to someone that isn't a part of this fandom, that hasn't seen the Conjuring film? Probably not. But if you are like me and you have seen the Conjuring 1, 2, 3, La Llorona, the Nun 1 and 2, Annabelle Creation, Annabelle Come Home, then yes, you want to see how are they going to conclude this era of the franchise. Again, we'll see. Money talks, right? They say this is the end, but if this makes more than the last film or the one before that, they'll probably back. They allude to like the legacy can continue with other characters, which I would imagine they'll probably tug on that string if they decide to do so. But if you are a fan of this franchise, I think it's worth seeing just for the simple fact that I felt the Warrens' story ended on a high note, ended in a positive note, a note that kind of got me emotional. So with all that being said, I'm going to give The Conjuring: The Last Rites, I'm going to give it a very strong to almost wane to I'm going to give it a 3. I'm like at a 2.5, but then I think about the performances, I think about the emotional stuff. when Michael Chaves, I don't want to accuse him of this, but I feel like when maybe someone else helped him at certain scenes, James Wan, then some of those scares work. So I'm at a 3, which to me is right in the middle. 3 out of 5 for The Conjuring Last Rites. So that's my thoughts, y'all. I appreciate y'all watching this review, but now I want to know what you all thought of the film if you decided to see it. What were your positives? What were your negatives? What was your favorite scare? What was a character moment that worked for you? And where do you rank this amongst not only the Conjuring films, but also the franchise as a whole? Like I said, if we're just focused on the Conjuring, 1, 2 are the top 2. Then I will put the 4th one in my 3rd spot and the 3rd one in my last spot. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Again, thank y'all for watching. I have other movies reviews coming up in the coming week or 2, but I'm going to be in the TV world for a little bit with Peacemaker, continuing covering that. Only Murders in the Building is coming back for season 5. We got a new show on HBO called Task. We got the return of Gen V season 2. And then I'm also covering a film festival in a couple weeks, Fantastic Fest. So subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this video, like this video, and you all stay safe. You all are awesome, and I'll catch you soon.